Today I'll talk about a Next.js, but first you need to install Node.js if you haven't. All right, what is Next.js? It's a framework that allows us to use React, but mostly on the server side. So what happened is React.js is a library that we use on the front end to build user interfaces. But that came along with the single page applications. Traditionally, in the web, whenever you click a link, it would load a completely new page. So it would ask for the server, hey, I want the HTML page for this. The server would give it back. And then every link that you clicked would be a full page reload. And then people thought, well, why don't we just load a page once and then let the client build everything from there? That's when single page applications came along. So basically the server just sends the HTML bare bones, pretty much empty HTML, but then sends a bunch of JavaScript. And then the client side is the one responsible for building or constructing the page on the client side. That is, all the work is delegated to the person who requests the website, to their browser. And then the server side, traditional, kind of came back, and now they're kind of doing a hybrid approach where they thought, what if we kind of do it traditional way? The first time people request a page, we kind of render it on the server and send it all in full HTML, and then the client gets that full page. And then from there, it can act as a single page application in the sense that when they click a link, it doesn't really request a whole page load. It's just manipulating the document with JavaScript on the client side to render the completely new page, which isn't actually a new page. It's just a illusion kind of thing. So that's when people use React, and then they thought, okay, let's do React on the server side and do this approach. That's when Next.js came along, and it's pretty much React, but you can also add some server-side rendering, meaning you can just give the user the full page render on the server side. And you might be asking, okay, what's the benefit? Well, one of the huge benefits of this is for search engine optimization, SEO. Because the problem is every time a bot from the search engine, a crawler, they would come and see your page that's written in React. The HTML is empty. Pretty much there's no information there to let the search engine know what your website is about. So Next.js can fix that because it will render everything or pre-render on the server side. So whenever the bot crawls and sees your website, all the information will be there in the HTML already. So that's a huge benefit. Anyway, enough of the overview. Let's get to it. So we're going to need a terminal. Let me open one here. And I'm going to share my terminal. Hope you can see that. Now we need to create a Next.js project. So we can use npx create -next -app. And then if you want to pass the name, you can. But they also recommend now to pass the version for some reason. So add latest to always get the latest version. So you can add that as well. And if you want to put the name here after with space, you can do it, but it will ask you later if you don't. So let me put Next.js -post because I'll kind of make like fetch some data that'll be like blog posts or something. Press enter. It will ask you, would you like to install, create next app? You can say Y for a yes and press enter. The reason it didn't ask me is because I already did it before. Once you do that and it installs create next app, it will ask you a few questions about the project you're about to generate. Now, you can be very customizable. Like you can use TypeScript, you can use other things. We're gonna see. I don't want to use TypeScript right now. I want to keep everything very simple. But if you want in the future, you can do so. Yes, lint. I don't need any linter right now, so say no. I don't want to use Tailwind. No. Do you like to use src directory? I don't want to use it right now. So no, I press enter, by the way. Do you want to use the app router? Well, this is the new way of routing that was released by Next.js in the latest versions. I'm not going to use it right now. I'm just going to do it the traditional way, which is file system based routing. So I'm going to say no. I'm going to press my arrow to the left and say no. Would you like to customize default? No. Pretty much I selected no for everything. I want to keep it simple. Just if you were to manually create a Next.js project, all you would have to do is install these dependencies: React, React-DOM, and Next, and then that's it. But it generates everything for us, so it's convenient. Anyway, you can see here there's now a new directory, Next.js dash posts. So I can cd to that, cd Next.js dash posts, enter, and I'm going to open my text editor. In that case, Visual Studio Code, code space dot. Dot means current directory. You can use whatever, but I use VS Code. Anyway, let me see here. While I got that open, I am going to start the development server. And to do that, it's pretty much using the next dev command. So you would say npx next dev, but actually they create a script for us. So we don't have to remember this. We can just say npm run dev, and this will run next dev. You can see here, I highlight what's actually being run when I say npm run dev. Okay, so that's going to power up the development server. I think it's localhost 3000 by default. Let me see the code here. Let me show you. So here's the code. Just so you know, package.json has the script dev. That's why I said npm run dev, because it's already here. It's basically just calling next dev. And while I'm at it, I want to ask if anybody has any trouble creating the project, because this is like a crucial moment. You need to have the project. Otherwise, you cannot go on. If you have trouble, let me know. Okay, I'm assuming everybody is doing okay. So, what do we have here? So you're gonna have this file nextconfig.mjs. Pretty much is the configuration file for Next. If you need to change anything, you would do it here. We don't care about this right now. There's some JS config as well. This is mostly for compiler options, and it would be more relevant if you had like TypeScript. It would be tsconfig.json. What we're interested in right now, I have the pages directory, and this is where the stuff goes. So Next.js will automatically identify what pages need to be created based on the file system structure for this pages directory. So you have index, you have underscore app underscore document. Basically, underscore document allows you to kind of change the overall structure. And they have these tags for HTML, the head, and the other stuff. So underscore app, you don't have to worry about. It's just passing props. And then index, this is the actual homepage. It's basically the slash. If you go to localhost 3000 slash, it will hit this index page. And it's pretty much like if you know, React is just a component. It's a function that returns a JSX template. And what's important here is that you export default that. Otherwise, Next won't know that this is what you want to show for the page. So make sure export default the component that will be used for this page, the index page, which is slash. Now let's take a look at the page and see what we get in the browser next year. By the way, here's the terminal. It's letting you know it's localhost 3000. You can control and click in some terminals that will follow the link. Let me go to my browser. So in the browser, localhost 3000, enter. It's gonna build a page and send you the page. Okay, so this is the page. So pretty much we are in slash right now. So this, you can see it got started by editing pages.index.js. So it's like file system based routing in the sense that if I want to create a page slash, I would create the file pages/index because slash is index. It's implicit. And then if I want to create, for example, post, which is I'm about to do, I would say if I want to slash posts here to be like a page of blog posts or something, I would have to create the pages slash posts.js. Let's do that. See, make sure I'm in the right. Okay, so I'm here, pages, right click, create a new file, posts, plural.js. Then I'm going to export default a function, and you can call whatever. I usually follow pages. Let's see the name of the file, posts. And obviously, if it's React, you're going to get props, but if you don't use it, you can omit. And then return some template in JSX, which is JavaScript, but it looks like HTML. So we can add whatever here, maybe just add a div. And list is posts index, just so we have something. So Next.js is going to automatically know, hey, I see a file post.js, therefore I must create the endpoint or route slash posts. And this is what I'm going to show. Going back to the browser, I should be able to go to slash posts and see that very page. This is the post index. I'm going to increase my zoom here so you see better. 150. Now I notice the background is black. And that's because of the styles that is applied there. We can remove that if you don't like it. Because here, what happens is pages slash underscore app, it imports this global CSS file. So there are different ways of adding style in Next.js. And if you want global styles, you can do like an import and then the path to the CSS file. In this case, it's going to be under styles here, globals.css. So you see a lot of stuff is defined here. If you don't like it, just delete it all and make it empty. And going back to posts, because this underscore app is actually rendering every page that you go to is actually going through this underscore app. That's why you always see the CSS being ported there. So it's kind of like a layout stuff. You know, if you come from other frameworks like Rails or there's a layout file, this is kind of look like that. You would make a layout here so that every single page has this code. I might have noticed this @ sign here. This is just an alias for the imports. This means to go to the root /styles. Just not aliasing stuff when you import things. All right, so that's the global style. Going back to posts, let's talk about fetching data. So in the client side, traditionally React, if I were to fetch some data, I could use a use effect here. So if I import React from React and I do React.useEffect, pass a function and a second argument empty array. What I'm doing is just some people don't like using React dot here, so you can put use effect here if you don't like, by the way. That's the same thing, okay? Anyway, I'm gonna be explicit. I like doing this way for beginners. Uh, Basically, when this component is rendered for the first time, that is, this template is shown, right? I want to execute something right after that, and that's the function for the use effect. Now, I need to have the second argument as empty array because that means I only want to execute this once after the first render. Otherwise, it would be executing after every single render. Render just means this function post is called again to render the template. Anyway, I want to fetch some data with the fetch API. I'm going to use this website here. Let me see. I can show you. Get the URL for the JSON Tippy code. Where is it? There's a website that has like a fake API that we can use for data since we don't have a backend right now. And I'm gonna show you in the browser here. Let me show you. I always like to use it. So this is the address. I'm gonna post to the Zoom chat. Basically, it's called JSON placeholder dot typicode or typicode.com/posts. And I'm going to add a parameter to limit to just 3 posts because there's too many. And the raw data is just JSON. And there's some information we can use in our app. Basically, it's just the title and body of the post. It's like a blog post listing. So I'm going to use that. So let's go here to back to VS Code. So I want to fetch the data for every single post. So fetch that URL. And since we're using fetch, I'm going to do that then here. And this returns returns a promise that fulfills with a response object. And this response, we can extract the body in JSON format calling response.json. That in turn also returns a promise. So we got to do another then there. And finally, we will get the retrieved post. And then we can do something with that. Now, I usually like to break a line here for the style. I think it looks better like this. Okay, so usually we store this. Okay, we got all the posts, but we need to store them so we can show them. So I usually store that in a state of the React. I don't do just a plain variable because if you do plain variable, React doesn't know about it. So it will not know when to re-render this. Because initially there will be no posts, nothing to show. And then it's going to make a request to get the post. It's going to take some time. And then you get a response. And then React needs to know that we have retrieved the post. Therefore, you should re-render with all these posts. That's why we always need to use state. Whenever the state changes, the React component re-renders. So I'm going to use react.useState, and I can pass an initial value to this function. I'm going to put an initial empty array. And then here it returns two things, two things, right, in an array. One that accesses the value and the second to modify the value. So usually with this structure of const square brackets, meaning we take the first element, extract to the variable called post, and then comma the second element, extract the variables that I usually call set post. You can see it's always the same pattern. Describe what you're storing here and set whatever the name for the variable was. That's just a naming convention. You can choose whatever if you want. Somebody's waiting. Okay. Okay, so somebody just joined. Maybe I can give you something to follow. Hold on. So we just we created a project in Next.js. And let me give you the command. I'm gonna paste the Zoom if you want to catch up. That's the command we use in the terminal to create the Next.js app. And then we run with npm run dev. If you want to catch up, those are the two commands. Anyway, let me continue here. So I just created, I want to store posts in the state. So when I retrieve the post here, I want to call set posts with the retrieved posts because I want to store them now. Once I get them stored, I can finally leverage them here. Let's remove this. This is post index. And I can go and map over the posts. So post is an array of objects. So I can map over them to return element components. And I can pass an arrow function here, post. And if I want to be implicit about the return, I can put the parentheses. And I want to create a div here. And inside the div, I'm going to add the post.title. Now React is going to complain whenever you map something, you need to add it to the outermost element, a key that's unique. I usually put the ID of the resource. So post.id there. So this will map over posts. In this case, there's 3 posts, 3 objects. So it will create 3 divs, and each div will have this key is just for the mapping. And then inside we'll have the title of the post. Okay. Now with that, I'm going to go to the browser to see if it's working. And you can see automatically fetch. Here you can see 1, 2, 3 per line. Now, if you want to learn more about this stuff, I think you can press F12 And I think it's the sources tab on Chrome. I'm using Firefox right now, so that's why it's called debugger here. But I think I can go to the code and find Control P, and I think this is called post.js, and press enter there. This one is like I don't want that one. Let's see if there's, oh, this one. The second one is with source map, so I can see exactly the original code. So I'm just trying to show you how to debug with the dev tools and how to understand the response. Maybe you don't know exactly what this fetch is doing. So what I would do is I would go here and put a breakpoint on line 10 to understand what retrieve posts look like. So I would refresh, and you see it stopped right here. So what I do, I can hover over this and see, oh, this is an array of 3 elements. What's the inside of first? Oh, it's an object. It has the properties body, ID, title, and user ID. So you can see I'm using the title, right? This is what's showing on the page. So this is one way of debugging. If you want, you can also open a console here. Let me see. If you click, where is it? Typically, we have it here at the bottom. Or you can click console and type what retrieve posts, enter. It will also show you there what it means. This way you understand what data you're dealing with. So you're not blind about what exactly am I working with. Since I understood the data, that's why I put a post.title, post.id, so I know exactly what it was. Anyway, that's the debugger. Clicking back to the debugger or the sources tab on Chrome, I can uncheck that breakpoint so I can press play to let it go and keep going. And I can close the dev tools. So I understand now the data. I understand now what I'm seeing here. Now let's touch this up a little bit with some styling. But before I do that, let me know if you have any questions or you're stuck. Okay, I'm assuming everybody's fine. I'll keep going. So I want to put each of these posts in a box, like a rectangular box, to make it easier for us to distinguish them from each other. Because right now I think it looks like one single thing, but it's not. So going back to VS Code here. So what I'm going to do is add some CSS, but like I told you, I first show you there's some global CSS. That's one way. You could define the classes here and then use them here. Let's say I use it post dash box and define that there. But another way that Next.js lets you use classes is with what's called the CSS modules. So you notice there's this home.module.css here. That's used by the index, actually. So the way they do it is they import like this. But notice the import is to a variable called styles. And just the way that it's done, it's you're gonna see it. It's interesting. So let's try it. So typically what you would do, let's call it create a file here and name it, let's say the name, I usually call the same name as the corresponding file. So post.module.css. So Next.js, when you put .module.css, we understand what you mean right away. And here I'm going to define post box. And I just want some border, 1 pixel, solid black. I hope you can see this, not too small. And then let it add some 8 pixels padding and maybe some background color of F. Let's FF is FF all the way is white, so just a little bit less FD, FD, FD. What does it look like? I can even use my VS Code to pick it here, actually. Let's see. This one, F2 is nice. Okay. What else? Yeah, that's good enough. Now, how do we use this? So go back to post. So we got to import that. So import, give it a name like styles from, and then you can do like the @ sign, which means root. From the root slash, you're gonna go pages slash post.module.css. Now, the way you use it is not like what we did here. We actually have to pass the class name, use the curly brace there, and say styles. And then here, I need to access a property. The styles is an object that has the property, my class name. So I need to use the bracket notation because I have a dash in the name. So post dash box. So what this is doing actually, it's going to an object and and referencing this property, but the value is actually a class name, which is weird. You're going to see why is a class name. Let's go here and go to the browser. Oops, I need to fix that, right? That's not correct. I need to add the class to what? To the inner div, not the outer, because the outer is the list. So making sure it's on line 18, not 16. Okay, so now that's in the right place. Save it back to the browser. You can see there. Each one of them now is kind of separated. And let me right click and inspect of the dev tools. Now what you're gonna see is interesting. Look what each class name is. So we got post underscore prefix followed by the actual class name that we wrote, followed by some underscores and some code or unique identifier. So the reason I'm using CSS modules is that it kind of gets around, there's a problem of CSS conflict. What if in your website, you, for some reason, you're using somebody else's style sheet, like, somebody Bootstrap or whatever, and the class name is the same as the class name that you defined, so you're going to have a conflict. So the reason for CSS modules, okay, how can we get around the conflict? Well, let's make our class names unique. So we're gonna find a way of, okay, this is the original name. Let's add something to make it unique. So that's what it's doing. So that object that you saw when you reference style brackets post box, it's actually giving you the new class name, the like a translated class name. Okay, so that's what it's doing. Okay, enough of that. I think I should add a space between them. So I'm gonna go to this. You see this div that encloses them all? I'm gonna add like a margin bottom for each enclosing post box here. So let's try that. I'm gonna go to the Visual Studio Code. And remember, I'm gonna use post module.css. I wanna add this new class called .post box list. And all the child elements, immediate child that have the class post box, I want to have margin bottom of 8. Actually 16, let's add 16. Okay, the else is doing, okay, find the elements that have the class post box that are direct descendant child of the element post box list class, right? That's why I have this greater than. If you don't have the greater than, it could be nested somewhere under the post box list. But since we don't have any nested, that would work as well, no problem. I'm gonna save that, go back to posts. Now I need to add the class to the div here, class name, curly brace, and styles, brackets, post dash box dash list, like that. Let's see if it's working. Going back here, and I can see they added the class post underscore post box list underscore cut 96. That's like the unique ID. All right, so it's working. Any questions so far? Okay, now remember how I told you the big problem with single page application is when I right click, view page source here, I click right click and click view page source. I'm simulating being the crawler, the search engine crawler that's going through all the websites and going through this website right now to understand what its contents are. So I'm going to copy this code. It's a one liner, so hard to see. So I'm going to copy to Visual Studio Code and format it so you can see it better here. I use Control Shift P and select format document, by the way, and it automatically makes it nice, easier to see. So it's basically HTML, right? But I'm not interested in the head, so I'm going to collapse. I'm interested in the body. Look at the body here. That's what people see, right? The crawler is going to look at the body. And you can see here, post box list, right? It's empty, even though we see posts. Why is it empty? This is the big problem of single page applications. The problem is Next.js sends us the page, but initially, all that we see is, if you look at post.js, is this div here. And that's because initially post is empty. So there's nothing here to show, empty. It would have to first send the file to the client. The browser then will render the empty list, and then it will make a fetch request here to grab the post. That takes time. And the crawler is not going to wait for that. The crawler just want to see right away what the page is about. So that's the big problem here. So how do we fix this? How can we make sure that we see the post immediately as soon as we view the page source? Well, we have to do a server-side rendering. Render the HTML on the server side first, then send to the client the whole page already rendered, instead of having the client build it themselves. Now, to do that, one of the ways in Next.js is you have to go outside here. You got to export a function. I'll make an async function. And it's called get static props. Okay, there are different strategies of fetching data in Next.js. This is one of them. Now, you need to exactly export a function called get static props like this. And then this function is where we gonna do the fetch. Now I'm gonna comment this out to ignore it on the client side. I don't need that there. So I'm gonna take it and paste it here, okay? I just took this code and put it here. Now we don't need to set posts anymore here actually. And I don't need to use then here because if I use async, I can just use await. Okay, so I'm gonna convert this from promise.then to async await. It's the same thing, but because we're using a sync function, it's better to understand. Okay, so let me delete that. So when we do await fetch, basically this returns what? A promise that fulfills with the promise. So the response object, right? So we can say const response equals await. And that's the response. And then what did we do? We do response.json, right? So we can do response.json to extract the response from the response body, the text, and then convert to JSON. Now this also returns a promise, therefore it must use await. So the await is like the equivalent of dot then, but okay. And then you put in a variable. We call that retrieve post, right? And I like put semicolons there. Now that we got retrieve post, what we do here is we return an object that has the props property, and that's an object. And the object is whatever you want to return back to the component there. So let's do post colon retrieved post. So what this is going to do is Next.js at build time. You got to understand it's build time. Build time. What is build time? Well, when you have this Next.js project, you're going to build it, meaning you're going to pre-render all the pages with a command called npm run build or next build. And once you build it, you're going to put it in some server, and then you run next start, so the server is always on and listening to responses. But at build time is only once, right? Only when you build is when this data is going to be fetched. Okay, and this is going to inject a post property to this function here. So props.posts will appear. So instead of referencing posts here from the state, I'm not going to take that. I'm going to reference that from this variable prop. So I can extract that with this structuring like this if you want. Or if you don't like this, just write props.posts explicitly. Okay. Basically, post is now coming from props, properties that are passed down to the post. That's all done by Next.js. Okay, now let's save that, see if nothing's going to break. So we got the fetch, we got await. One common problem, by the way, if you do async await, some people forget to put the await. So that might mess up your stuff, because if you don't put await, the code is going to keep executing before the response is obtained. So don't forget to put the await whenever you have a promise. Okay, let's see if it's still working. In the browser, close this. Refresh. There you go. Still the same outcome, but I want to right click and view page source. What's going to happen? Let me copy the code back to VS Code. New file. Let me format document. And I'm gonna see, look what happened. All the posts are there initially, which is different from the other, right? Remember, before there's nothing. At first glance, there's nothing. Now there's something. And because of this, the search engine crawler will see, oh, this is the content for the website, and will index it and add all the information so that the other people, when they do a search, will find content from your website. So this is one of the big advantages of using Next.js and server-side rendering is it improves search engine optimization, SEO, because you render everything in the server side first, and then you send back to the client, and the client doesn't need to build everything from scratch. Okay, how's everybody doing? Okay, nice, but let's see. There's a problem with this approach here if your posts change very often, the content of the posts. Maybe somebody changed and updated the post content. And if you do that, it's not going to be reflected on the page. Why? Because the page content was only rendered or built, created at build time, meaning it was done only once and at some point in time. And then the application was deployed with that content. And then after some time in the future, the content changed. And so in order for you to show the new content, you would have to build the application again and deploy it again. So that's a big problem. So how to get around that? Where, what if we fetch the posts when I make somebody request it, right? I go to the website and then your Next.js server will say, hey, I need to get the post right now. Let's retrieve all the posts. So that's different from doing only at build time. Now we're doing it at runtime, anytime, a dynamic. Let's do it. So to do that, you have to use another function. Instead of get static props, you're going to use export async function, get server side props. Okay, server side props. That's the name you have to use. And then you're going to pretty much do the same thing. Just copy and paste the code and comment out this get static props. Comment out meaning make the computer ignore it. We don't need it anymore. So that's how you switch from static to get server side props. Obviously, you could have just renamed it here, but I want to keep the code here for reference. So let's try again. Let's see what happened. Going back to Firefox. I want to refresh, see if it's... So the outcome is the same, right? I always get the same thing. Right click, view page source, copy. I'm going to see the same initial things there if I format it. Yeah, it's still here, right? The posts. So visually, and it didn't seem anything changed, but actually it's changed. It's something different. If I had changed the post, this would give you the new post content right away. And if you want to monitor the things, you can see in the terminal. Here, this is the terminal. Whenever I try to load a page, it's gonna give me some 200 there. You see that? 200, 200. So at every request, it's building all those, fetching all the posts and building all the list and rendering and sending to the client on every request. Okay, so that means the data will always be up to date. If you change the post data, the client will get the new data. That's drastically different from only doing it once at build time. Okay, let's go and do about, we do a page to see the post. Usually when you click the post, you see more information, right? The whole post, right? From the index is like the listing of all the posts and you click one. And you can see that specific text for the post. Now, how do we do that? Well, typically the route is slash post ID. So let's create that page. So how do we, the post ID is kind of variable. It could be 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on, right? So how do we do a dynamic route in Next.js? So create a new file with the name square brackets, and you put the name of the variable here that will hold that ID. I usually call it post whatever ID, like post ID, resource name ID .js. Okay, it's just a post ID in square brackets, and I'm using camel case, so the I is capitalized. Okay, so this will be the page for the specific post. So I'm going to export default function, create a React component here. I usually call it what posts, post ID, whatever the route is for this. Remember, this will be slash p post slash the post ID, like slash post one, slash post two, and so on. A bit like that. Okay, and this also takes props because React component, and you can return something, a div right now. Great, but when we go to the page, how do we get here first of all, right? This is the post page. Let's just add something placeholder. How do we get there? Well, obviously they can type in the browser manually slash post slash the number, but we don't do that usually. We click links, right? So let's go back to post.js and actually link the post style. When I click the post style, it goes to the post page. So in order to do that, instead of having a div here, actually inside the div, let's do inside the div. I will enclose this, what's called a link component. So link, like that. And we got to import at the top. So import link from next slash link, like so. And then we must tell, okay, where does it go? Remember, HTML is the anchor tag, href, same thing here, href. But I'm going to use curly braces and say with the backtick, so I want to interpolate string, slash post slash the post ID. In this case, it's under post.id. That's easy, right? So if I say dollar curly brace post.id, it will be interpolated. That means for every single div that's generated here, it will take the ID of the post and put it here, like post 2, 1, 2, 3, and so on. Okay, so that's why I use that. Make sure it's a backtick, otherwise it doesn't work. Backtick is the key next to the 1 on the keyboard. It's not a single quote, it's not a double quote, it's a backtick. Okay, let's see if the link is working. See, all of them are linked. I can see it's going post 1, 2, and 3. Let's click 2. Now, what happened here? Page could not be found. Let's try to fix that. That's a 404. So in order to fix that, okay, I created a post ID, but Next.js doesn't know about that. So what I would have to do to go to slash posts first, I have to create a directory here called posts. And then I put the post ID inside. So that means, okay, if the user tries to go to slash posts, I need to go to the post directory. And then they're going to type something that could be a variable, like 1, 2, 3, or whatever. That's why I have to have the square brackets here. Now let's try again. Now you can see it's working, right? If I put 1 there, it's going to work same way. Put 3. Okay. That's the file system-based routing. Okay, with that out of the way, let's actually get the information for the post. So what we do typically, okay, we're going to do the same approach as we did for posts. We're going to choose a strategy of fetching the data. It could be static props. It could be client side. It could be static props, meaning only at build time once. Or it could be server side props, which means every single request, we're going to fetch it again. I wanted to show you the ones for static prop. So since we don't have time, let's jump right into server-side one. So if you were to do fetch the post, just export it in async functions, get server-side props, and then you're gonna do the fetch. Now, this case is just one specific post. And if you go back here, post.js, the route that we're gonna use, going back, I just copied the fetch parameter there. We're gonna use something like this, right? I'm gonna use backtick, but it's not necessarily limit 3. I'm gonna remove that. It's gonna be slash the ID of the post here, post ID. But how do we get that? I have no way of accessing it. But Next.js is nice because if you have like a dynamic route parameter, you can access it. So you can access from the client side or the server side. So you have to understand where you are right now because it's different. Okay, so right now when I'm in server side props, I'm on the server side. Therefore, the way to access the route is through what's called the context. Okay, so that's a parameter that's passed to get server side props. And then we're going to access params out of that. So if I say context.params.post ID, this post ID, by the way, must match the exact file name here. What's between the square brackets here? You must match that. Okay, that way I get the post ID that the user typed. And then I can follow the same approach, await that fetch, put that in the response. And then, okay, take the response, convert to return a promise JSON, put that in retrieved post, whatever you want to call it. And then you return an object with props. That's an object. And then you call it whatever. Let's call it just post, singular. And that's retrieve post. And then from the component here, you can access props dot post. So if I go here and say props dot post dot, let's say title, and put that in an H1, let's see what we get. Oh, yeah, let's go. Let's see if it's working. Okay, what's the problem here? Error serializing post return server-side props. Okay. You could try to go back to your code, or you can use the dev tools but the problem is there's a problem using the dev tools here because you're not going to be so lucky when we switch to server-side rendering and fetching it there in the server side. That's not client, so I cannot use the dev tools here. If it were just client-side fetching, I could go and have a look at that, right? If I look at the sources here, tab or debugger on Firefox and look for post.js, I don't see it because it was all server-side rendered. So that's the downside of server-side rendering is it makes it little bit harder to debug stuff. So in order to debug that, you would have to look at the terminal. For example, let me show you here. Let's go back to VS Code, Next.js post. And I'm here, so I would go here and console log. I intentionally put something wrong there. It's something I talked about before. So if I console log retrieve post to see if a post is actually there, I can put it here, maybe put in an object like so. And if I put a console log in the get server side props, I should be able to see it in the terminal. I'm going to show you my terminal here. See my terminal? And I'm going to go in my browser and trigger the page again so you can see the terminal showing something. Do you see what's happening? I showed right here. That's my console log. I see retrieve post, a promise that's pending. Now I understand what the problem is. I don't know if you got the problem. The promise was not resolved to a value. That means you didn't handle the promise. And that's very likely I forgot to put an await. Let's look. Did I put an await here? I didn't, right? So I have to put an await. Because this returns a promise, I have to handle it. It's like a dot then. Now, if I save that with the await, go back to the terminal. Let's verify again. Now, do you see retrieve post is now an object? That should be the correct approach, right? Now this object will be passed down to the component, and then we can access all the properties. Title, props.post.title, props.post.body, and so on. Okay, now that I fixed that, I go to the browser, I verify it's actually here, right? Now let's add the body of the post. That's not so nice. Okay, let's go back here, and in the client side, right? Or what's rendered initially, I'm gonna add a div props dot post dot, I think it's body, right? Body. Yeah, body. And let's add some style 'cause it's ugly, right? Very ugly. Maybe you could add like class name here for the post content box or whatever you want to call it. And then class name here, post content box dash title. And if you want the body, you can add something. Maybe I don't need it. I think these two will suffice, but if I want to use it this way, remember, there's two ways here. Globals or CSS modules. If you want to do CSS modules, you got to do that same approach. Create the file and then do it like we did here with the styles, import styles, and then use styles square brackets. Now, let me show you with the global style, because the global style, I don't think it uses that conflict resolution of CSS module. So I think I could just say dot post. I went to style slash globals here, by the way. So that means every single page will get this definition of style, which is different from the other one, the CSS modules. Only that page gets that specific style sheet, which is kind of optimization, right? So I wouldn't usually put this in the global, to be honest, but I'm just doing for the sake of example here. So what do we call it? Post content title, and I had another class post content title. Oops, I call it box, right? Post content box and post content box. Let me go back and forget. Content box title. The box, content box title. There you go. So the content box just want to add some borders. 1 pixel of black, padding, 16 pixels. And then for the title, want to add some margin to the, not margin, border bottom. How about that? 1 pixel solid, black. And then maybe some margin. Margin. You're gonna see what it looks like. Just we could play around later. Maybe yeah, I like that. Maybe that's fine. Now let's see if it's working. Let's refresh. Oops, abandoned post. Did I save it? Let me make sure I saved it. Save it. There you go. Okay, just like that. If I right click and inspect, you see now the class names appear as they were. There's no change in class name. Like the CSS modules would add a prefix and a suffix to make it like a unique class name, but this one doesn't do it if you do it globally. Okay, so we got the title and the content, the body. And this is all doing at request time. It's fetching the data request time. So your browser will ask Next.js, hey, I want to see the post page. Next.js in turn on the server side will ask another server for the data. And then once it receives it, it will render it there, pre-render on the server side. And then finally, we'll send that render page to the client. Yeah, so a bit more complex than a traditional approach where you only have a server and a client and only, this one has like three people, right? A client, Next.js server, and another server with the data. All right, so I think I'm out of time, but that's my introduction to Next.js. For you, server-side rendering, React, if you're interested in that. You can keep building with that. It's very interesting. You can also do, if you learn Express.js, you can create Express.js API endpoints from Next.js code in the /API folder here. Let's just show you real quick. You see this pages/API? That's where you could write API stuff, just like a Next Express.js. You see handler function with rec and res, and you can send res and send there. So there's also that. It could act as an API as well. All right, so that's it for the lesson.